Hey everybody, welcome back. Yeah, Steve Basic Architect here, and let's talk about windows for that passive house, the very first one that I ever did. So yeah, you know it. We are out here in our Vibe studio. Yeah, I got that Vibe board behind me, game changer in helping me help you. Right, bringing that information, have this basically endless palette of drawing space, and can bring up images and such so that we can talk about it. Yeah, you know it. I'm Steve Basic Architect, and I am a contributor on the Build Show, so go check that out. A lot of these videos, they show up there. Also, different aspects, so I can talk about this stuff all day, every day. Yeah, so let's get after it. Passive house. This was the very first one I ever did. Yep. I designed it in 2009. We built it and certified it in 2010. I want to say it was number 5 on the passive house roster in America. It's in Climate Zone 5. It's, yes, up here in New England. It is literally right on the water. You'll see that when we see a couple of these interior photos. And as the third part to our mini window series, which is part of the larger series in general, we're going to talk about the heads of windows. Now, the interesting thing about the head of a window, and when I speak of the head of the window, you know I'm talking about the tops of the doors and windows, right? Now, there's something that all of these windows have in common, and then there's a few differences. Let's talk about what they have in common. If a window's going to leak, the greatest chance of leakage is probably at the head of the window, right? It's kind of like if I go outside in the rain, my most sensitive part of my body to the rain is my head and face. So what do? I protect it. Protection, right? I put an umbrella over it. Look at all the heads of the windows here. They all have an umbrella over it, right? They all are protected. I treat my houses the way I want to be treated. How about that? And they're all very well protected under some significant, this is on the order of a 24-inch overhang. The same here. This is probably close to about 5 feet or more there. And, over there we have at least 18 inches that we're protecting the heads of those windows. So let's talk a little bit about those windows. Yeah, you can see here, this is a 2-story wall. Not a whole lot of protection there, right? And there's this thing, I call it the aspect ratio. And the aspect ratio is pretty much how much protection do I have horizontally versus the distance above the window to the wall. So if X, so this really for me wants to at least be 1-to-1. If I can get it 2-to-1, right, where the X dimension is twice the Y dimension, then yeah, I'm extremely satisfied. This one here, yeah, our X dimension here, it is very, very little, and that's actually a function of the frame. There actually isn't any overhang here. So our aspect ratio on that one is somewhat nil, which means when I look at that, that window is one that I should have some of the most concern with, right? Because the execution for flashing and sealing and all of those good things that are happening to that window have to be spot on, right? Because you know, we're again in a high wind zone right on the water, that window is going to get tortured. This window, however, look at this. We have 24 inches there, about 8 inches there. So that's a 3-to-1, right? That is really good. But it doesn't stop there. We actually have another 8 inches. So it's a 3-to-1 plus, I would call it there. And by having this drip, if there was a driving rain that somehow made it here, this water would want to drip down before it travels inward to that window, right? Window heads, you know, this was a pretty simple house. These were all drywall returns. You can see this is a very simple one. We're probably on the order of maybe about 6 inches of reveal there. So this one here, because it's in the middle of the window, some people would call it middies. You can see the clapboard siding or shingle siding on the outside and then the interior there. So that one's in that mid portion of the wall, or in this case, for my explanation, I've been calling this the innie. And then notice here, this one's pushed all the way out, and we'll call that the outie, right? So the outies are certainly at more risk because we have absolutely no protection above that. Water comes down, it comes down to the window top, and it immediately challenges that window, as opposed to the windows that are inside. Water comes down and it still has some lateral ground to cover. Oh. All right, so here's the details. We have that kind of mini outie, or innie. Let's focus on the outie first. So make this nice and big, and we can talk about it. You know, very similar to the jamb and sill detail. We have our window frame. This is inside, this is outside, right? You can see our triple panes of glass. This is our sash. And this is our frame, window frame. And notice the window is pushed all the way outside. So unlike the sill where you pull the window into that middle third as an innie or middy, you expose the sill and it becomes a very high risk. Here, we push the window all the way out, and while it helps the sill minimize risk, it puts the head in a very vulnerable position to leak and not be able to drip water away, and get rid of it by sliding it in, increasing that aspect ratio, and providing a little bit of protection. Now, notice our sill detail, our jamb detail, and our head detail. Well, yes, they're very similar, right? For me, when I think about detailing a building, the first thing is success, right, or function. Does that detail work, right? Does it push water away? Does it handle the 4 control layers in a way that I need it to? Secondly, is the window detail simple, or is it recognizable, right? Are there things in there? Yeah, okay, we have a 2x6, we have a header, this one's insulated, we have zip sheathing on the outside. All of those things are very compatible with standard understanding of construction of the day here, right? And then lastly, is the detail executable, right? So it can look, I can recognize some things, but if you're asking me to cut and twist and bend and fold and do a whole bunch of things, then it really places that detail in question, that it's recognizable, but it's really not simple, and it's really not functional, because if I'm having a hard time executing a piece of flashing tape, then I put that flashing tape at a much higher risk in understanding there, right? So anyways, making the details somewhat homogeneous across the sill, the jamb, and the head makes us get to a point where we have a really good understanding. The builder has a really good understanding because they're doing the same thing down here that they're doing here and that they're doing up here, right? Unless we have cause for some concern where the sill's at more of a risk and we have to add a little bit more to do it there. But the window's pushed all the way out. This one here, we call it the Audi. And yes, if you can hear them, those are my dogs downstairs and I'm about to kill them. I own 2 Great Danes and they're literally below my studio here. It's early in the morning and they know I'm up here, so they're yelling at me. So yes, it's not limited to the women in my life, my wife and daughters. It's my dogs too. Take advantage of me. So, but couple things of note here. Notice the layer of double protection, right? So we have our zip sheathing that comes down onto our framing member. We have our nailing flange there. We then have our, in this case here, a membrane on the outside, and then we have, this is taped, and there is a gap here. And notice that, you know, that's probably on the order of maybe 3/16. And it is not caulked. I know, the sealant companies of the world are going to hate me, but the minute you pull out a caulk gun, the very first question you should ask yourself, what am I sealing in, right? If I seal that, water gets in here, it's either going to be forced in or it's going to sit out here and rot something, right? By having that 3/16" space, anything that gets behind this flashing, right? I have a piece up here also, and that's flashing my trim piece there. So that's kicking water out above my head casing, but below my siding, and then that's taped back to the system. But if any water did get into that system, I have that little 3/16, let's call it a relief valve, and understanding that, yeah, we can absolutely push the water out through there should any get in, right? So, and notice that's not caulked. You know, it's one of those things, I know sealant, a lot of people use them. One of my pet peeves is returning to a project 4 or 6 months later and the caulk is, you know, instead of being the white that it was, it's now a dark gray because it's gathered up a bunch of dirt, and it just, I don't know, it never really looks good to me. I would rather just have a little shadow line, open joint, knowing that water can certainly get out if I need it to. So my zip on the outside, my closure piece here, and again, belt and suspenders. This is taped, that joint, but I also have beads of sealant. So I'm sealing this to the framing member, sealing this to the framing member, which means this is sealed to that by virtue of a few smaller connections there. And then that gives me basically a weather-resistant barrier on this plane and primary air barrier. We'll call it the PAB. Yeah, we coined that right here, the primary air barrier. And so we come in and we put in our bead, or our, backer rod. Looking for that word. And then we, expanding foam sealant, inside and out, and that basically makes the connection from our window frame to that piece, right? And that piece is connected to this piece, our primary air barrier, and that piece via some weather stripping connects that to the sash. There's some sealant in here where my 3 pieces of glass get connected to my window, or in this case, the IGU, which stands for insulated glazing unit. And then that's connected. So my insulating glazing unit is connected to there through all of that, right? So air barrier is not just one material in the house. In this case here, it might be 8 or 9. Now, that's the Audi. If we come over here and look, this one here, I can't move that all the way over because this one is on the roof. Let's look. We have water. It falls there. If water does fall there, we provide a drip there, so hopefully it falls there. But if not, we have this 24 inches. This is about 8 inches, right? 3 to 1 on that aspect ratio. Also notice, if water did get in, there is no sealant there being shown. So we can drip water out. A lot of times, and I didn't do it here, but I would have in the past, I'd push this up a little and I would have a little gap here because you're never going to really see it when you look up. You're going to see this bottom edge. You're not going to see that. But a lot of times I'll provide a 3/16 inch gap right there. And so if any water gets in behind all my trim system, it can just drain out, and it drains out well in front of that window. And then coming in here, pretty much everything looks very much the same, right? Our primary air barrier there, and across here, our bead of sealant, bead of sealant. So those two get connected. Our window frame, our window sash, right? And then we have the connections of weather stripping there, the IGU connection to there, our backer rod there with some expanding foam there, and there, this connected to that, 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 and it goes around the house. As far as water management, I get that additional 8 inches here. For the energy nerds in the world, this is in the middle third of the wall, so we're good there. All of our stars pretty much align for a very, very successful installation. And then, of course, you know, doing things like putting in the crown molding, the fascia here, our beaded soffit, our ventilation for our roof, all of that stuff is above and beyond once we've solved for the risk of water on that. So anyways, those are the window details. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Window details are certainly some of the funnest things for me to draw. If you're looking for more, you can find me, Steve Basic Architect. I'm a contributor on the Build Shore of course. This is the Vibe board, and across the lines of social media, yeah, you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, and of course YouTube. You guessed it. I'm going to say it. Smash that YouTube. If you're already a subscriber, go out, become the town crier. Yeah, some of you might actually have to look up what that is, and belt out Steve Basic Architect. Yeah. And tell them to subscribe right here on YouTube. So anyways, until next time, you know it. Long live our buildings.